This is the intention of this is to prepare a 3 to 4 minute film, which shows to someone who is not exposed to Janagana what is the problem we're looking to solve, what's the way in which we're solving it, and what's the kind of impact we've had so far. So that's the broad objective. So it starts with, let me actually begin with, there is a switch on that projector. So let me begin with this. We have put some of this material together, so I'm going to use some of this material as a starting point and then tell us if this works. So we start by saying, let's take an example of two Bangaloreans. This could be two people in any Indian city. We don't want to say Bangalore. Two people in any Indian city. Take Nagaraj, who is an auto rickshaw driver. Okay, he's single income, 2 children. What is his quality of life? What is Nagaraj's experience of quality of life in Bangalore? He lives in a rental place, 200 square feet. It's a dense slum. It's off of, say, Mysore Road. It's next to an open drain which is overflowing with garbage and sewage and stuff. He has a community water tap. He doesn't have a tap in his house. He gets water 2 hours a day, twice a week. They use, there's no public transport that they can, they have some kind of a bus system, but it's not very convenient. And the pedestrians, footpaths and so on are not that great. His house is, the slum is close to some park and playground, so his kids can go and play and so on. They're concerned about going to the police in case something happens because they feel that the police looks down on them. They will not register any FIRs and so on. So this is Nagaraj's life in Bangalore as an example, a snapshot. Okay. At the other end of the spectrum is Pradeep. He's an IT executive, senior executive. Again, he's single income, 2 children, but he lives in a Indranagar, off of Airport Road, nice 4,000 square foot independent home. But his house is also next to a drain. It's got overflowing garbage, it's got overflowing sewage. He doesn't get water either, but he's got a sump and he's got an overhead tank, so he gets the effect of continuous water supply even if the water supply system is not continuous. As far as transport is concerned, it's totally privatized as transport. He doesn't, he has a chauffeur-driven car, he goes to work, gets dropped off, his family, wife and children use car, and they have a security guard and an alarm system. So this is Pradeep's quality of life. And let's compare these two guys with two similar people in New York. This is David, who is a taxi driver. Okay. Family is again 2 children. He lives in his own home. He's got a 400 square foot affordable house off of in a place which is in mixed income zone in the borough next to Manhattan, which is in Brooklyn. It's a clean environment, there's no garbage on the streets, he can drink his water from the tap that he opens in his house. His family uses pedestrian friendly streets, they walk to wherever they want to walk to, they use terrific subway system, bus system, to go wherever they want. They have fantastic parks and playgrounds. Safety, any issues that come up, there's a neighborhood community police group, there's a community watch group, and whenever he feels something he wants to say, there's a community local council where there's an opportunity for him to go. If he's agitated about some issue, there's an access. This is the equivalent of Nagaraj. Guy equivalent of Pradeep is a trader on a Wall Street, trading floor. Very well off. Lives in the real irony is he lives in a rental, this guy lives in an own place. Okay? So he lives in a 2,000 square foot nice loft in Manhattan, upper income neighborhood. Again, clean environment. Here's the interesting thing, right? He also drinks potable water from the tap, and he uses the same public transport system that this guy uses. So he walks to work, he takes the tube, he takes the subway, takes the same bus system, and so on. And he's enjoying pretty much the same quality of life. So there's very little difference between the quality of life that these guys experience. Why is that the case? Why is it that the guys in Bangalore have to? Why do we need to suffer this kind of quality of life? Is it because we are a developing country and they are a developed country? So that's the difference. That okay, some point this will, Bangalore will become like New York. But as we become richer and a better country, we'll also become like New York. And our answer is no. The difference is actually deeper than just the fact that we are a developing country and they're a developed country. The difference is how our institutions run. Who's responsible for giving this quality of life in New York? And who's responsible for giving us what we are experiencing right now in Bangalore? And we need to understand those so that we can understand why are we not getting the same. So if you look at New York, okay, this is the structure, the org chart. So the simple way to think about it is, in both cases, one of them is the city of Manhattan, city of New York, is the government of New York, city government of New York, and the other is the city government of Bangalore. So if you want to understand how are these city governments organized, what role do they perform, what responsibilities do they have, what kind of people do they have, how much money do they have? Simple way to start is to say, let's look at the organization chart of these two city governments. Let's look at the org chart of the city of New York. What does it tell us about how we are getting good quality of life in New York? So this is the org chart of the city of New York. This is the mayor who runs the city of New York, and he's supported by borough presidents. There are 5 boroughs, each borough has a president. There's a controller who's in charge of all finances, payroll, and so on. There's a public advocate who's representing them on all legal issues. There's a council of all elected members from different parts of the city. And then there are district attorneys who take care of issues of law and so on, crime and so on. Okay. There's a multiple set of departments and responsibilities that the city has, which the mayor is responsible for. And I'll walk you through a few of those. Take one example, which is take transportation. Okay, the Department of Transportation and the Taxi and Limousine Commission, okay, is under the city of New York, which means how many taxis should get licenses, how many limousines can be actually given medallions. All of that decision and making sure that those guys, the rates, the tariffs, everything is under the mayor and the city of New York. The other department is the Department of City Planning. How do you ensure that the taxis have taxi driving lanes, what are the challenges and so on. Another example is all authorities which are related to making sure that these things are done correctly. Board of Collective Bargaining, Civil Service Commission, Public Information, Environmental Control, the entire subway system of Manhattan, Metropolitan Transit Authority is under the Mayor of New York as part of the city government, right? So, if you take all this into account and you say every relevant department for traffic and transport is under one institution called the City of New York, coming under the mayor. Take another example. Let's take city planning. As I said, the Department of City Planning is under the City of New York, but so is the Economic Development Corporation. That means the City of New York can say, okay, we want to have more jobs in finance, so let's give incentives. We want to make New York the competition for Hollywood for, let's say, entertainment industry, to do shootings, to do films, to do studio work and so on, right? Then you need to have, so you want to have economic development, the city planning, the housing authority. Where does the low income housing come? How do you do preservation? The Department of Buildings, what is the bylaws for buildings? Which of them are landmark buildings? All of those are coming under the issue of city planning. Again, all relevant departments are under one roof, in one institution. Take another example. Look at law and order. The entire police department of New York comes under the city of New York. Related to police is the entire issue of legal affairs, the entire issue of correction, that means jails, all about. Look at even down to juvenile justice. People who are young kids who drop out of school and they get into criminal life. Domestic violence, Office of Combating Domestic Violence comes under them. So all the different aspects related to safety and crime are under one roof, coming under the same city of New York. Okay? Look at community participation. They have borough boards, they have community boards. There's a chief service officer and a volunteer center. There's a Department of Youth and Community Development. There are other things like the Civilian Complaint Review Board. So even when it comes down to community involvement and participation, all of the different aspects to that are under the same organization. Now, compare New York with Bangalore. This is the org chart of Bangalore. Okay? You've got the council, you have a mayor who's not elected directly, who has a one-year term. Okay? And so, as a result, nobody even knows what this person does. So, by the time the term is over, the next one comes, nothing much happens. You have a commissioner, okay, who's appointed by the state government. The commissioner is not appointed by the city. So the city's main executive running the organization is not accountable to the city, the council or the mayor. Okay. Then look at the departments. Okay, we have some age-old department called animal husbandry. Okay. This is all the departments we have: election, revenue, animal husbandry, town planning, IT, welfare. Okay. And now let's look at this is all the departments and services that are not under the city, but are under the government of Karnataka as standalone, transportation, etc. So let's look at exactly the same three things that we looked at for New York. What happens for, let's say, transport? The only activity that is directly under the city corporation is the maintenance of city roads. Okay? Every other thing in relation is falling outside. The Bangalore Metropolitan, all the subway system, the bus system, Bangalore Development Authority, the entire traffic police, the planning for the, what are the networks going to be like, where will the stations come, how will the public transport interface, where will the auto rickshaw stands come, the entire auto rickshaw oversight, how many licenses will we give, none of operation. So look at the amount of dysfunctionality with respect to one issue, which is traffic and transport. Okay? Take another example. Take the example of planning. The city has absolutely no planning role other than building plan sanction. That means you say, I want to build a 2-story building, I have to go to the city corporation and get a plan sanction. But they are not the ones deciding how should this area be residential, should that area be commercial, should we have mixed use, should we move towards, let's say, more densification of the city. Those are not decisions that the city takes. In fact, every decision around those, we talked about in New York, where is the Department of Economics? How do you decide the economic planning? That's outside the city. It's in the Department of Economics and Statistics reporting to the government of the state. The entire plan, responsibility to produce the plan is done by the Bangalore Development Authority, which is not accountable to the city government. There's a state Department of Town and Country Planning. In fact, there's not a single planner, not one planner that the city of Bangalore actually has on its roads. And the metropolitan region planning is also done outside the city. So as a result, when it comes to the issue of planning, there's a completely disconnected, dysfunctional city government environment that you're faced with. Take the third example, which is of community. There's not even a forum, there's not even a department, there's not even an office responsible for community voice, or this is city safety and crime. There's no role for the city corporation and city and crime. It's completely handled outside. Take another example, which is on community participation. Not a single opportunity for you and me as residents of our city to have a voice, and not just in the city of Bangalore, but in any department across all the state government offices. So there's no community participation at all. Now you compare the two institutions and then you start understanding why is it that those guys have experience to better quality of life compared to what we have. Okay? So the organization chart is a great way to start understanding, oh mother of God, look at what they've got set up there and look at what we've got. But one is the organization chart. Associated with the organization chart is money. Compare the two cities in terms of the budgetary allocations. This is the city of New York, by the way. Incidentally, pretty much the population of the two cities is more or less the same. New York has 82 lakh people or 8.2 million people. Bangalore has 8.5 million people. So we actually more or less are similar sized cities. Budget of New York is $66 billion. Billion. Our budget in theory is 1.8 billion. In reality is not even half of that. Let's give them that the 1.8 is true. Let's do what is called purchasing power, because it's a variability. You can't compare apples and oranges. So you should compare it in purchasing power. Okay? So you do budget per capita, they spend $8,000 per capita. We spend $200. Even if you adjust it for purchasing power, which is double it, we spend $400, they spend $8,000. So again, another example of showing why is it that they're getting a better quality of life? They're spending 20 times more than us per capita. And look at where their money is coming from. 70% of New York's budget comes from their own resources. 30% comes outside. Look at us. Less than half of what we need comes from our own resources. 60% almost of what Bangalore needs comes from outside Bangalore's own resources. And even that is 1/20th. It's only 5% of what a New Yorker is experiencing. So another reason is how much money is available to cities. If you look at the US, city governments have massive budgets. whereas state governments have less budget, because most of our things that we experience, right, in our lives, roads, water, traffic, sewage, garbage, air, all of these are the responsibility of the city. Crime. Whereas in India, all the responsibilities, but there is no money. So we have to allocate more money. That means state government should become smaller, more money should become available for the city government. Look at the much bigger role, many more qualified people. You look at the kind of that org chart, it was full of different roles. Planners, engineers, technical experts. Bangalore doesn't even have a single planner. Bangalore's number of engineers is not even 5% of what we need, which means we need to have hundreds of more engineers in the city of Bangalore to do justice to our quality of life. Much more money. This difference in the institutional structure is the reason why people in Bangalore or any other city in India, this is true of every city in India, are not able to experience the kind of quality of life that we see in other countries. And so if we want to get that kind of a life, we need to change those institutional structures. We need to decentralize more to our cities. That means we need to give them more power, more role, but we also need to give them more people and we have to give them more money. So that's at the heart of how we need to address the quality of life issue. That's one part of it. Okay. Let me now move on from this and say, if you want to compare therefore quality of life, you're saying there's a quality of life, there's a difference between Bangalore and New York, right? Why is this difference arising? We are saying the difference is arising because in New York they have more role for the city, more technically qualified people, and more money, right? All of this is basically what you are saying, you need to have better decentralization. So if we want to fix our cities, we've got to get better decentralization. So that's one of the background issues. But if we just give more power, more money, more people, one of the big risks is that you decentralize corruption. Right? So instead of now having corruption at the national level or at the state level, you are going to get more and more corruption now at the local level. Okay? So what has to go along with this? Along with this, we need to have governments which are transparent, which are accountable, and which are participatory. That means there's an opportunity for you and me to actually have a say. Right? So if we had all this, which is if we had decentralization, which is more power, more people, more money, along with more transparency, more accountability, more participation, then you can have some magic happen. You can actually start seeing the change on quality of life take place. Okay? The last piece of this is, who's actually making these decisions? Right? So if you really want to make all this happen, it can't be that we're just sitting around and talking among ourselves. Which means you've got to go and lobby with the policymakers. You've got to work with policymakers to say, hey, let's have more decentralization. Let's have more transparent governments. Let's have more accountable governments. Let's create more opportunity for people to participate. Right? Then you'll solve this problem. Right? Because India doesn't have 100,000 problems. It has 100 problems repeated 1,000 times. So don't try and solve it all upstairs. Send it downstairs so that Bangalore will solve it by being decentralized, transparent and accountable and participatory. Mumbai will solve it by being decentralized, transparent, accountable and participatory. Bidar will solve it the same way. Belgaum will solve it the same way. Baroda will solve it the same way. Everyone will solve it in their own ways, but the principles of it will be this. Okay? So, this is at the heart of what Janagraha's work is about, which is at the heart of our theory of change. Right? That's what a theory of change for a non-profit organization is. And people who look at non-profits or look at NGOs must ask this question first. What is your theory of change? Which means what? Fundamentally, the theory of change says, if I do X, what is the outcome I expect, right? a theory of change. It's a hypothesis. It's like saying, okay, if this is what your diagnosis of the problem is, that you need decentralization, you need cities to be transparent, you need them to be accountable, you need to be participant. What will Janab Lahar do to make this happen? Right? And so what are those things you do to make this outcome happen? That's our theory of change. So what does Janab Lahar do? Janab Lahar does the following. Keeping this in mind, our work is essentially about three pillars, right? We're saying we want governments to be transparent, accountable and participatory. Okay? So if we have programs that are specifically focused on making them transparent, making them accountable, making them participatory. But in order to change the laws, we have to build capacity among the policymakers. Because the guys who are going to decide to decentralize and make them transparent are the IAS officers, are the politicians. So we actually go to the IAS Academy in Mussoorie. We have a MOU with them to say we'll be your knowledge partners. Okay? How did this happen? Because IAS Academy in Mussoorie is like the Gangotri, okay, for the entire administrative infrastructure in the country. 5,000, 6,000 IAS officers who essentially are the steel frame that run this country. They get their learnings. Just like you go to IIT, you go to IAS, you go to Mussoorie. You learn about how to administer the country. 65 years, that's the place that they've been going to. 65 years is nothing on urban management. Because India was a predominantly rural country. So what we did was, we went to the IAS Academy and said, listen, why don't we partner with you to build urban capacity among the IAS officers, to get them to understand why cities need to be decentralized, why they need to be transparent, why they need to be accountable, how can they be more participatory. So we have an unprecedented MOU between the IAS Academy of India and Janab, where we are their knowledge partner for all urban activities. So right from a fresh IAS officer who's coming in, who goes off into the districts, right? We have actually introduced a new module which says when you're in your district, you will do an urban project. For example, you will go into the district and do a study of where is the bus stop and where is the train station in that little district town. How come the bus stop should not be closer to the train station? So that's an example of planning, thinking about planning. Why is the villager coming to the bus stop and then going by Jatkavandi or walking, for 2 kilometers to the train station? Why would we not have located the bus stop closer to the train station? It's a simple example of thinking about urban management, urban planning and so on, right? And who decided this? So things like that. So building urban capacities. That's one example. So we go to the IAS Academy and we give them the orientation to think about urban issues more systematically. Another example of what we do in terms of building urban capacity is technically, specifically on the master planning. We talked about the fact that cities are not even responsible for planning, right? But we also said that they have more, when you look at the Western countries, they have more planners. Indian cities don't have planners. All of India produces less than 150 planners in a year. So where is that technical skill going to come from? That has to be enhanced. So that's another thing we do through our sister organization, which is India Urban Space, it's Swati runs, which is to say, let's actually show you how master planning should be done. So she's done the master plan for Jaipur. She's actually shown that now to the government of India in Ministry of Urban Development and said, this is how master plans should be done, so that you actually can future-proof the city. So you don't have ad hoc development, you make sure that there's equity, you make sure that there's public transport system, you make sure that the garbage doesn't get dumped and then have all kinds of crises that we had because a dumping yard is wrongly located. All that you can actually solve if you do better planning. So she's shown that, and then she's gone and worked now to say what kind of policies do we need to have to do better planning. Okay? That's another example of what we do. We actually do. Today she's doing 6 towns, she's in Delhi today. 6 towns of the Minister for Urban Development, whose district is Chhindwara and Madhya Pradesh. He said, hey, you guys are doing only big cities. My biggest town in my district is 2 lakhs, Chhindwara. So she said 2 lakhs is a big town in Europe. The same issues of master planning for Jaipur or Bombay are true even for your Chhindwara town. So over the last 3 months, we actually built master plans for Chhindwara over the next 20 years to say Chhindwara will go from 2 lakhs to 6 lakhs. Its population will triple in the next 20 years. And it's already bursting at the seams. It's already a dirty, dusty district town of India. Right? How can you make it into a really good quality of life place where the river that's passing through it is actually pure, the sewage is not flowing into it. That bus stop problem that we talked about can be closely located to the train station. The economic activity, if the district head wants to go and get, say, investors to come, put up shops, put up factories, where will you locate them? Have the master plan that can talk about it. That's been done. So we're doing in building capacities on master plan. Another example. The third example is urban design. It's not just master planning at a macro level, right? But how is our road getting built in India? Take any road, whether it's Bangalore or anywhere. How is the road actually getting built? The reality is we have no standards, no specifications, no procurement contracts, nothing. And what is the road? It looks just like a piece of asphalt. But actually the road is a utility corridor. The road is the corridor on which not just your transport is moving, but your water supply is located. Pipes are there, the sewage pipes are there, the electric wires are going, the OFC cables are going, the telecom cables are going, tomorrow the gas cables are going to come, and today it's complete free for all. Which is why you see the fact that one guy, and these are all different agencies distributed different places of the government, so that's why you see one guy laying the road and the other guy cutting it open. Right? And even when they cut it open, they don't know where the wires are, because there is no system by which the road is actually designed and built. So the other thing that we do is a program called Tender Sure. Okay? Tender specifications for urban road execution. How can you actually design a system by which the road is actually specified and detailed based on a classification? MG road is an arterial road. Obviously the classification for MG road will be different from 4th Main in Malaysia, which is a neighborhood road. So you have a hierarchy of roads: arterial, subarterial, collector, sub-collector, local, sub-local, and the capacity and the design specifications for different roads will be different. But that needs to be done, and not just at the top level, but even below the level, so that you can have predefined ducting for water supply, for telecom, for OFC, so you don't have to dig it open. So that's been done. And Government of Karnataka has allocated 250 crores to do the first 25 kilometers of Tender Sure roads. You know that, say, Vittal Mallya road by UB City? The one that looks good now, everybody likes it. That's a Tender Sure road. That was done by us, designed by us, and executed by the private developer on that road. But the design specification, so what's underneath the road, how can you have pedestrian utilization, how can you have bicycle lanes, all that. So this is all in the area of building capacity, both at a policy level but also at planning and design level. Then we work on addressing the issue of transparency, accountability and participation. So for example, what do we do on transparency? Right? We have a program called I Paid a Bribe, which is an initiative which is about retail corruption. How can we reduce retail corruption? Not 2G scam, not Commonwealth Games. We're not saying that's not important, but we're saying what we care about is how do average citizens experience life in our cities. And I want to minimize the frictions of the life that you experience. Whether it's you're getting a birth certificate or a death certificate or getting a driver's license or getting a passport or getting your home registered and so on. So I Paid a Bribe is about making government more transparent at a local level on the day-to-day issues that matter to you and me. So that's an example of an initiative that we take up here. How can we make governments more accountable? We have an initiative called Proof, which is Public Record of Operations and Finance. What does Proof stand for? Very simple idea. We're saying, how come every time the quarter ends, June 30th, September 30th, December 31st, March 31st, private companies have to release their quarterly earnings? Whether you're a Reliance or whether you're an Infosys or whether you're a Tata's, you release your quarterly earnings and you say, here's what happened in the last 3 months. How come we don't get that for our city governments? Why can't we get quarterly reports of performance from our city governments? Why can't we get a public record of operations and finance from our city governments? How much money did you get? How did you spend it? Where did you spend it? How do you measure whether you're doing a good job or not? Obviously, measuring this for a city government is different from measuring it for a private sector company. We're not going to measure it on profitability or return on equity. But you can measure it on saying, you take up water supply, how well did you do on water supply? What's the unit cost for delivering a unit of water? Did you do well by it? Did you have losses in your water? Do you have recoveries of your water? Do you ensure that you're billing correctly and collecting correctly? Right? Similarly on education, if you take up private education, what does it cost you to get one pass student every year? Right? Do you have any metrics like that? So we want to know on a quarterly basis accountability for the public money? Are you collecting all the money that you're supposed to collect? You have millions of properties in Bangalore. Is everybody paying their property tax? If not, why are you raising property tax on the 50% of us who are paying? Right? Should you not be doing a better job of collecting from everyone and lowering the rate rather than having more paid by a few of us? So accountability, both in terms of where your money comes from, but how your money gets actually spent. How do you prioritize? Why would you put more and more money all the time into Jayanagar, which is already a developed place, or MG Road, rather than the peripheries of the city, the underdeveloped parts of the city? Why would you not allocate money there? Be accountable. So all these aspects of accountability under an initiative called Proof, where we are actually lobbying with the government of India to say, let's have a law for public disclosure. Everybody knows about RTI. Right? But what is RTI? RTI says, Jay as a citizen of India can go file an RTI application and get some information. Correct? But imagine if you were a shareholder of Reliance and you went and told Mukesh Ambani, I want to know how your company is doing. And he said, just file an RTI application. That's not what happens. Every 3 months he gives you information himself. If you want anything more from that, you go to the shareholders meeting and you ask him questions. So what is that thing that they should give you, which is disclosure? What I give you myself before you have to ask me. That is what we are saying. Every 3 months you give me something yourself. On top of that, if I want to ask you questions, I use RTI. So Proof disclosure is RTI version 2.0. Incidentally, in the RTI law, Section 4 actually says that there should be disclosure, but nobody has actually fleshed it out. Jayanagar is the first one that's gone and said, let's have a standard format. We now are working with the Controller and Auditor General to put out the format for disclosure. How will they disclose? What will they disclose? How can we understand so that I can compare Bangalore with Bombay? I can compare Hyderabad with Chennai and so on. So that's on accountability. On participation, we run a several programs on participation. We have a program called I Change My City, which is a platform, a web-based platform which says, how can I take a better role in deciding the destiny of my neighborhoods? How can I be more informed? How can I actually take part? Okay? So at a grassroots level, there is a lot of work that we're doing. We work with school children, 8th standard kids, through a textbook called Me and My City. We say, why should our civics lessons be some boring stuff about what are the powers of the Lok Sabha? When does the president adjourn the house? Who cares? Why don't we say, we have a textbook called Me and My City, in which we say, where does my water supply come from? What happens to my garbage? What does the sewage treatment plant look like? So that's what we've been running. Over the last 10 years, we now this year are running it in 150 schools and it's now moving to 4 other cities. Okay. So that's another example of participation, Balajanaka. Okay. But this is on transparency, accountability and participation. Another important aspect of participation is how can we change the law so that this participation becomes part and parcel of how the city runs. Right? So just like in villages in India, you have what's called Gram Sabhas. What is a Gram Sabha? Gram Sabha is a platform of all the registered voters of the village who can actually come and have a say in how the Sabha does. The Panchayat has to come to the Sabha and say, okay, this is the budget, you guys are okay with it? How come there's nothing like that in the urban areas? How come you and I don't have the equivalent of a Gram Sabha living in a city? So we went and lobbied, we created a platform called Area Sabhas. In each polling booth, the 1,000 of us who are members of the voters list, we can be members of that Area Sabha. That can be connected to the municipal corporation through an Area Sabha representative ward committee structure, a 3-tier structure. That's now in JNNURM, Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission. There's a law called a Law for Community Participation, which mandates that there should be a formal structure for citizen participation. We drafted that law, we lobbied for that to be included under the mission, and it's now been passed by 23 state governments across India. And over the next 3, 4, 5 years, this will become part and parcel of how people can actually start participating in their areas. So that's another example of what we do on the participation side. So capacities, participation, there's a last piece of this, which is ultimately how our cities are run is a function of who your political representatives are. Who are the politicians who are actually getting elected and going to power and saying, I am now deciding because you gave me the right to decide, right? We all know that in urban areas, people say 40% is the turnout, urban voters are apathetic, they don't even turn up to vote and so on. So 10 years ago we went and said something's wrong with this. That's not, everybody seems to care, how come people are not turning up to vote? And as we dug into it, we realized that the quality of the voter list is completely broken. That voter list, out of 1,000 people in a voter's list, 600 names are wrong. The person has either died, or the daughters got married and moved away, or the tenant moved away from Indira Nagar to Koramangala. So as a result, there's only 400 good names. So when you see 40% turnout, it's actually pretty good because it's almost everybody who is on that list is turning up to vote. Right? So how can we keep that list? Why is it like this? Why is there 600 bad names? Because the system by which the voter list is managed is broken. It was meant for rural area. The election commission, once a year in the rural area, they go out in November and the Tehsildar would read out the list in the village and say, is Gangubai here, is Hanmantram there, and 2-3 people would be changed, that's it. So once a year, 3 people land up and do or read the list, that's fine. You take that 19th century system and you put it into a city where you got hundreds of thousands of people coming into the city and moving around in the city, and it's totally overwhelmed. So for example, imagine an assembly constituency is 2 lakh voters. Our data shows that 10% of these people move every year. Okay? That means 20,000 people in an assembly constituency, your names have to be changed. You have to remove those names every year. And another 20,000 people are coming in. 40,000 names have to be changed in each assembly constituency. That once a year in November, that local officer are coming with some school teachers. In urban areas, there's no public schools also. So there's no infrastructure. It's totally overwhelmed. And as a result, those names that need to be deleted, those 20,000 names, never get deleted. So you see those 50, 60,000 errors, and that's why every once in a while there's an SOS, and then you see all these names, they're going to do massive deletions, and then there's a big hue and cry, because the system is broken. So a new system which is meant for urban India and the population demographics of urban India needs to be built, because only then will you get the political representatives, your corporator, your MLA, your MP, who you can say is genuinely getting elected because I voted for him or her. Because then they have legitimacy. Right? Then they have the ability to say, hey, I got elected, I made a promise to you and I'll keep my promise. Today, 40% is the turnout. People are winning with 20% of the vote and 1% margin. So they have no legitimacy. And because they don't have legitimacy, they don't feel they're accountable to you. And they make all kinds of weird decisions. So we're sitting here and wondering what the hell is going on? How come democracy doesn't work for us? So if you want democracy to work, it starts with saying political representatives must be legitimate, and the legitimacy is related to the voter roll. So what are we doing about it? We're not just theorizing about it. We actually took this issue to the election commission. We showed them that this is the problem, that there's actually an error rate of over 60%. Election commission said they signed an MOU with us. First time a constitutional authority signed an MOU with an NGO. And they said, thank you for bringing this to our attention. Thank you for showing us for the first time that there's a problem, emerging problem in India, which is in our cities. Then they said, went one step further and said, can we work with Janagraha to solve this problem? So over the last 1.5 years, we are actually putting a new system in place, which is called pure rolls, proper urban electoral rolls. So we want to say, let's have a system where the error rate of the voter roll is less than 5%. Because then, when the election comes, we can actually tell people, hey, you know what, don't sit around in your house, get out there and cast your vote. Because today, I don't know, even if I'm interested, whether my name is going to show up there. Right? And for every fellow whose name doesn't show up, there are 10 people who say, forget it, man. Okay, it should be as easy as going and buying a bottle of Coke. Going to cast a vote should be as easy. If Barack Obama was in India, he'll never win an election. Because 70% of the people who voted for him got registered in the last 2 weeks of the election. In India, you can't do that because the system doesn't allow for that. So unless you fix the system, especially in urban India, through a new approach called pure rolls, you can't get better lists, you can't get better turnout, you can't get more legitimate elected representatives. Okay? So that's another thing that we're working on. So if you look at it and then you get the right elected representatives who are accountable to you, they will then, you can hold them accountable to say, why don't you make this decentralization happen? Why don't you make them more transparent? Why don't you become more accountable? And you give me a voice, because you don't give me a voice, I'm going to throw you out in the next elections. Right? So this is the sum total of what Janagraha does. Right? We want to work on making our local governments, our city governments more transparent, more accountable, more participatory. But we also recognize that it's not just enough to do this, because there's a huge gap of capacity today in our cities. And that capacity issue needs to be addressed. So we're doing 3 things in that. We're working with the IAS Academy so that at the senior-most level of our bureaucracy, people are getting sensitized to urban challenges. Then we are actually intervening at 2 technical levels, which is master planning and urban design. Then we're working on the central aspect of the political machinery, which is how can we make sure that those who are actually standing for elections are legitimately elected because the system has clean rules. Okay? And our goal is, if all of this happens systematically over time, we can improve and put in place the infrastructure to deliver better quality of life for our cities and towns. Okay, so that's the second piece of the puzzle. So the first piece is, so in terms of the filming of it, right? We're saying the first piece is, how can we compare, this is the first piece. How do we compare quality of life? How do we make the argument that, look at this, look at New York's org chart, look at Bangalore's org chart, this needs to be done. So that's the first piece. The second piece is, all these things that we're doing, right? Laying this argument out, but through the eyes of each of these players. Okay? So not just us talking, but go to the IAS Academy, the guy who runs the IAS Academy, who's partnered with us, him saying, why is this important, this initiative of doing urban capacity building, and what has Janagraha done for us? Right? Go to master planning, go to the Vasundhara Raje, who was the Chief Minister of Rajasthan, who invited Swati to do the master plan for Jaipur, and ask her, why did you do this? Why is master planning important to you, and why did you invite Swati to do the master plan? Go to Karnataka government and Kiran Mazumdar and ask them, why did you think that getting Kendra Shore was important, and what value did Janagraha or India Urban Space add? So every one of these initiatives, we actually go to the Controller and Auditor General, Vinod Rai, and ask them, why do you think disclosure is important? Okay? And what is it that Janagraha has done? So every one of these, not talk about it ourselves, but actually from the perspective of a stakeholder. Election Commission of India for this. So actually there were three parts. The first part is what I would call the theory of change. Right? Lay out the argument for the theory of change. And then our programs, but through the eyes of the stakeholders, which is the video snippets and whatever it is. And then to say, okay, so this is why we do what we do. This is a glimpse of our programs as seen through the eyes of stakeholders, so that automatically gives you the impact. It's not just us theorizing about it. People, when they talk about it, it gives you a lot more impact. The third part is aspects to Janagraha. What are the key aspects to our approach? And there are 3 or 4 key aspects to our approach. First is, we work both at grassroots, with citizens, and policy with government. So we are not either or. We do both citizen-centric grassroots work, but we also do advocacy and policy work with the government. So that's the first aspect to our work, and you can see this in many of our programs. The second aspect is, we are both focused on detail and the big picture. We focus on getting the road done correctly so that the pedestrian footpath and the crossing is done correctly. But we also focus on master planning for regions of 2,000 square kilometers. Because urban India needs both. We can't do either or. Okay. Third, we so there are 4 aspects to that qualify our work. We do pilot projects, which can then scale. So if you take the voter list as an example, we started with one constituency in Bangalore, took the entire learnings from that one constituency to say, hey, if this is true in this constituency, this is true across Bangalore, and it's not just true in Bangalore, it's true across all urban India. So whatever we come up with as a solution, let it be applicable at scale. So we're coming up with this thing called Pure Rolls, which is not just for Bangalore, but a new way by which the Election Commission will manage urban voter lists across India. But it begins with demonstrating it in one area as a pilot. The same thing we did with Kendra Shore. We did one road and now we're scaling it up. So that's another aspect, it's a signature aspect of our work. We begin with pilots and then use it to scale. And the last, I'm forgetting the last one, because Swati and I had debriefed and she's not here today, so there's one more piece and I'm forgetting that. Okay. So there's a 4th piece here. And underpinning all this is a belief in the power of technology. to be transformative, to be a force of transformation that can make governments decentralized, transparent, accountable and participatory. We think we're sitting on the tip of a revolution in how technology can become a force multiplier for how cities can be governed and run, where all of us can have a role to play. So, in a nutshell, that's what our work is. Right? Now, what we've thought of is to say, can we do this in these three buckets broadly in terms of a film? This is what we had discussed, this stuff is what I just walked you through. There's some materials, org charts, all this stuff and so on. And this can be done through some form of, say, animation, putting some graphics together, getting some video shots of, say, stock shots of New York and some stock shots of Bangalore and so on. This is, we will list out for every one of these. If we can put out, what we want is like a